My name is Sarah Winkelman, and I'm going to be doing my rebuttal today. I'm going to be addressing debate number 3, side A, because I did debate number 3, side B. So I'm going to be rebutting the other side. And I watched a couple of videos of the people who chose to do side A, but I'm going to focus mainly on Rachel Wagner's post. So yeah, to get started, Rachel said a lot of different things about why military intervention is good. U.S. military intervention in the world is generally good, and obviously I disagree with that because I chose the other side of the debate, which is that it's generally negative for the rest of the world when the U.S. military intervenes. But some things that she said was, how do we, it depends on how the local population liked the U.S. military intervention, and that played a major role in if it was a successful intervention or not. I don't necessarily agree with that because I think I don't think it does matter a little bit if the local population cares and accepts the U.S. military in as helpers. However, not every case is like that because there's many different scenarios where the government wants the U.S. to intervene, but the local population doesn't, or vice versa. So, like in Syria, when most of the population is not the same religion, not the same nationality, ethnicity, whatever you want to say, as the leading in charge government, the government doesn't want the U.S. there, whereas the local population does want the U.S. there. So I think it's an important distinction to say that because not every, as I said in my original debate and as we talked about a couple different times, not every situation is exactly the same and you can't repeat it. So it's important to make that distinction that while some governments might want the U.S. there, not the citizens living there might not want the U.S. there, and vice versa. The government might not want them there. The citizens do want them there. So it's a hard distinction to make. But I definitely understand Rachel's point in that. But I think that there's a little bit more to that argument. Rachel also talked about the difference between like Cambodia and Iraq and Kosovo, many other different problems and places that the U.S. intervened. But as I said before, not every situation can be replicated, so not every situation can be seen. Every situation is different, so maybe some people think the U.S. military intervention in Kosovo was a success because maybe it did kind of stop a genocide, maybe, or maybe the U.S. Intervention in the Yugoslavian crisis that goes along with Kosovo. It just we could potentially have stopped a genocide, but we don't really know. And then she also mentioned Rwanda and how the U.S. didn't intervene in Rwanda. And while I actually said this in my presentation, I believe that we don't know how it would have turned out if the U.S. intervened. We don't know if we would have stopped a genocide. We can't predict the future. We just know what happened. Unfortunately, millions of people died. It was a terrible atrocity. But we don't know that if the U.S. intervened, it would have helped. And we don't know if the local population would have accepted the U.S. We don't know if the government would have the government wouldn't have accepted the U.S. because we would have been stopping them from killing their own people. But it's hard to say. I think every situation is different. You can't put a blanket statement and say that U.S. military intervention is always going to help the world because many, many times, the many examples, they don't. It ends up being worse, like in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in the Middle East in general. We are constantly bombing through drones, as we learned. Actually, that was my other class, sorry. We learned about the U.S. Bombing Somalia and Yemen and Pakistan and Syria and all these other places that, like, nothing is coming of it. And if anything, the rest of the world is just starting to hate the U.S. because the U.S. keeps bombing all these places. So, um, I know I've just kept repeating it multiple times, but every situation is different. It really depends on the people there. It really depends on the U.S.'s strategy, on how they're going to go in and fix the situation. But I would say most of the time, U.S. military intervention ends up not being a success and not being helpful for that country that they're going into, that region, or the rest of the world as a whole. Thank you.